bit
Sure.
about you and we're connected because you reached out to me, was it 2 years ago? A year and a
It
half?
feels like a lifetime ago.
Man.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, I'm Justin Lamb. I'm a mental health advocate that helps people find their light bulb moments and give them a platform to tell their story and impact change for other people. So we met because of the podcast in which I do that, which is Friend Request. And you came on as, I don't know, would you call it a consultant? You're my professional licensed therapist that would come on and address very specific issues for the entirety, I think, of the second season. So yeah, God, that must have been at least 2 years ago now. How long have we been
Yeah.
in a pandemic?
Gosh. Well, that feels like,
Crazy.
yeah,
Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it was probably 2 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
And
Cool.
the rest is history. But yeah.
Yes, yes. And you are like, just so people kind of understand too, you are like a therapist in the making, essentially. Like you're starting grad school
Yes.
this fall.
Yes.
That's been a passion of yours. I think I already know that you're going to kill it. So I'm excited for you in that journey. But yeah, so you're working on that as well.
Yeah, I'm obsessive with it, but in a healthy way, people.
Sure, sure, sure,
Yeah,
sure.
I'm really excited, and I'm happy to be finally traveling down that road before I turn 40. So that's fantastic.
It's awesome. Cool. Well, I am going to start out with my first question. So tell me about your experiences with learning about your type or even like the Enneagram in general, and then like how that's impacted your relationships generally.
So I had a therapist that was very much about the Enneagram, and I'd never heard of it or anything. And early on in our sessions, she'd be like, "I'm pretty sure you're a 4," and I'm like, "I don't know what that means." And I was not necessarily receptive to anything that fell under the umbrella of like a personality test, because I'd taken some for work that I really did believe in, but then they would also say, "Oh, this is your core values. You know, these are never going to change." And then I'd retake the test 3-4 years later, and I would have a different set of values and be like, "Well, hold on, you said these were never going to change." So I was just kind of resistant to the whole idea. And uh, much to most therapists' dismay, she would give me homework to like look it up, read about it, and I never did. And then she finally just sent me the description, like a general outline of what a 4 is. And I was like, get the hell out of my brain. What is happening here? They were like a very key indicators that described a way that I've always felt that I've never felt like anyone understood, which is like kind of part of the whole 4 identity. And it kind of freaked me out. So that was God, like 5 or 6 years ago now. And so now my wife knows what number she is. And so we try to like figure out how we can interact with each other based on what we know about each other's Enneagram numbers. And I'm also at a weird transition point where I had a big kind of breakthrough moment last year. And as I revisited some of the like 4 stuff to talk with you today, I'm wondering if because of that, I might be, you know, inching towards like a 1 more than the 4, which like those two connect on the
Mm-hmm.
grand scheme of things. But reading the different descriptors again, I'm like, ooh, I kind of feel a little more like this, but we'll see. We'll see what time does.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And I think that's a like really good point that like, I mean, I've been a little bit wary about personality tests too, because like you said, like it's a weird, I mean, I think we are ever evolving creatures. So this idea that like you take a personality test and you're always that is maybe not the best way of thinking about it. I'm always like like I feel like with the Enneagram, it's kind of like take what's useful and use what's useful. And technically all of us have all of the different parts within us. It's just like more of like, what's your default right now? Like, what is your default part? And then where does it go when it's stressed? Where does it go when it's more high functioning? But yeah, that's interesting that you say that. I just interviewed an Enneagram 1 last week. So that's kind of fresh in my brain.
I like a lot of 1 qualities. And it's just funny because well, I don't know about the different tests. There's official ones, and then there's the free ones, and however that looks. And
Mhm.
the book, which I will show you because I love it. It's like a 1994, looks like a children's book, The Enneagram Made Easy. Um,
That's awesome.
but a lot of the questions, or all the questions, are based on how I was before I was 25. And
Mm.
like as a person, I was very different before I was 25. And I like to think like core values very different before I was 25. So there are things that stick out. And of course, if you remember any of our podcasting together, I made a list of said things, but
Of course
that
you
stick
did.
out that are like core Enneagram 4 things that I'm like, yes, these are still me to the core, like the root of who I am are these
Mm.
statements. Um, but then there's other stuff that I feel like I've really drifted away from as time's gone on. And like you just mentioned, I don't like
Mm.
to be put in a box, right? Like I don't think as
Mm.
humans we like to be put in a box, like, oh, you're even if it's a MTJB or whatever the Myers-Briggs lettering assignment, whatever it looks like. I don't think we like as a people like to be put in a box. So it's natural resistance to it. But when you read the stuff, sometimes it's like, okay, fine. I guess you get me, book.
Fine. Guess this has been resonating for me most of my life.
Yeah.
I'm just curious for the type 4, where do they go when they are healthier? What type do they gravitate towards?
Healthier goes to 1, and
Okay.
then and then negative goes to 2.
I was about to
And
say, are you a healthier 4 maybe?
it's very possible. I like to
You're
think
like,
I've
no,
gotten very
definitely
healthy.
not healthy.
Um, no, all the one stuff that I related to, I think, was more
Mm.
on a what I hoped to achieve before scale.
Mm.
So
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, well, and I know like there's another measurement that I've been using more lately just with people. And again, measurements they're there to be useful for what they're useful for. And it's the issues of over control. And the reason I say this is because it reminds me of in the directions are very clear. Like they're like, make sure you answer what is true or mostly true most of the time. Don't answer what you want to be or what, like to try to be like as honest as possible. Because I know that I can struggle with that too. Like sometimes I can feel like I want to answer more like, oh, this sounds like what I aspire to be, or this is
Oh
like my
yeah.
values. But it's also getting like trying to do our best to have self-awareness where like maybe that's more of what we want to be or what like we do when we're in our best selves versus like maybe our normal or default.
Well, it's funny you say that because there's some stuff. There's one of the cores of being a 4 is like you're very sensitive, emotional, that whole ordeal, which
Mhm.
some parts I'm resistant to, but a lot of the descriptors are like you might cry a lot, you might feel a stronger emotional reaction to things than other people, and I don't relate to those, except for like some sensitivity, like you hung up on me and maybe I'll be like, oh, Jenny hates me now, but uh, the irony of it is it's one thing that I work on in therapy is like I long to be that emotional person. I
Mm.
want to be more in touch with my emotions because I know just through working on myself for however many years, like I know that there were blocks built early on, like in my teenage years, against being that emotional and put out there and like expressing myself in a way that some people would view as maybe like being too sensitive or especially like with the idea of masculinity, just like I don't know, pick a term that's terrible like a wuss or something like that, because I would often go to like my friends and cry about a girl or something when I was 18, 19, and then uh, I got a number of signals that were like, don't do that anymore. And I think that's where I built the wall. So I long to feel that way. And I practice regularly now, like when I do feel an emotion, to sit with it and try to just be with that emotion, sometimes name it depending on what it is. And I love that. So even though I
Mm.
don't do the things like by the book of what a 4 is, that's what I long to have because I was that way when I was younger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally does. It totally does. And I think Yeah. It's tough because like as we like I feel like we all have like core parts of who we are, and then like the world kind of molds us in different ways. And when I say the world, I mean like our relationships and like you said, the signals we get, and we may react to that. We may stifle ourselves because of that. Like yeah, it's walls might be built, or we might even go more to the extreme because of like the experiences that we have. So it's like us and then us within relationship to other people.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it
Those,
gets a little complicated.
and those are some of the things that I was like laying the glue in for. Oh yeah, I'm for sure for. And I wrote to him down like in relationships. That's what specifically. I'm self-revealing and bond easily. I mean, you probably know that just from talking to me.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah. I
and
love
then
that. Like, yeah, you are yeah, like you're able to be vulnerable and open, which is really cool. Like more so earlier than like other people I've known, where it's like years before they share their life or like
well, and the
anything. Yeah.
downside is I can build attachments that aren't actually there. Like, I can build these mental attachments
Yes.
to people like, oh, we must be super close. It's like, no, you just I think Brene Brown calls it the smash and grab vulnerability, where you're just like, I'm going to give you a bunch of me, and that's going to create this connection that I want.
Now we're
And so,
besties.
yeah. But then on the flip side of that, in relationships, I can become hurt and feel rejected easily. And I was in bed last night reading all this to Erica. I was like going through the list, refreshing ourselves, and she was just nodding and nodding and nodding because all of us like, yeah. And
Leo.
I can do the same thing to her. She's a 6, and so like when we start talking about fear and anxiety and stuff, it's a lot of nodding with eye rolls. I think it's a nice combination.
That's too funny. So that's great, because I was actually going to ask you more like in depth, like what helps you in relationships about your type and what hurts you. And it sounds like what helps you is like your ability to get deep and connect. And then what hurts you can be like you might over read into signals of rejection or, other things where it's like, maybe they're not there, or
Yep.
if, yeah, I don't know.
So,
You
well,
can
as a
explain it better.
6, she, I mean, this is like a broader explanation on anxiety in general, right? Like, and I'm stepping outside the Enneagram, but these two things do fit our numbers very well. So, like I said, I'm a 4 and she's a 6. She has anxiety, and as a 4, I try to control people sometimes. And so if she's feeling out of control, instead of just listening to her and like reassuring her, I might try to fix it, which is also like a nice little masculine trait to go in there. Like men try to fix things.
Mm-hmm.
And that works against us. That's where our two Enneagrams are bumping into each other, instead of just creating that space where I can hear her and let her experience what she's experiencing. I want to go in and and be like, let me control this situation. Oh, you're worried about this? I will show you why that's crazy to worry about. And don't say the word crazy, by the way. That is a recommendation.
For the 4 or for the 6?
Well, I think for most people, don't call people crazy for what they're thinking.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
yeah, 6s with their
I mean, it's
anxiety,
my favorite, but
never call a 6 who has anxiety a phobic 6, as they're called. Never call them crazy, because it's not great.
No, and that's a good point. I think we use the term crazy and jokiness and like that sort of thing, but I think to genuinely call anybody's anxiety crazy is
Yeah.
So what's funny about what you just said too is like it's definitely a dynamic I see in my own relationship as well, and like I've seen in couple relationships where like both people are actually anxious. Like the fixer is anxious too, like the one who
Yeah.
needs to control it. Like that's their anxiety that causes them to say, I got to come in and control this and like fix it. And so, but it looks like the person who's like freaking out, quote unquote, they feel like they're the anxious one, or they can be labeled the crazy or anxious one. And it's like, no, actually both of you guys are anxious in this dynamic. And like, and not to like, I mean, we all as humans have our different ways of manifesting anxiety. So we all have our crazy. If we're going to call people crazy, it's
Oh
all of
yeah,
us.
I'm nuts.
But I hear
But
you in that. Like, it's very invalidating to call someone crazy in that moment, just like, to tell someone to calm down when they're angry. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, like that's not like, it just is invalidating.
And to narrow down just with the Enneagram in your question is how it how it affects our relationship in that way too. Um, a six wants to kind of seek out authority on certain subjects. They find security in authoritative positions, and the way
Mm,
that can translate sometimes is, you know, my wife will want to watch how to do something through, like, 10 YouTube videos before we actually do it. And
mhm,
if it's something I already feel comfortable in doing, I I take that as a rejection of my own skills. Like, that's how I interpret that, because that's how I am in relationships when I'm bad, is I feel that rejection easily. And so then I'm like,
mhm,
oh, that's a personal attack on me. She doesn't trust me to do it properly. So um, she has to seek out, the how-to videos and everything. And that has been a constant issue forever, just because it's uh, exactly what I just said. Like, she just wants to feel secure in knowing that, like, we absolutely are doing things the right way, check
mhm.
every box twice. And then I'm like, I don't need anyone questioning me because I know how to do it. Uh, and then that leads to me feeling rejected and, like, a 5-minute argument about nothing. So
Mhm.
that's how that can interact in a negative way. But
Yeah.
in a perfect world, and in the positive experiences, I'm a very loving, supportive, empathetic person, as in relationships, and so that plays really well into that. If she is feeling phobic or insecure or whatever that looks like in regards to her Enneagram, I'm usually the supportive, empathetic, uh, you know, comfort you when this is me rubbing a back. I don't know. It looks like I'm just waving, but comforting person. Like, that's who I am. That's what I enjoy doing. I like, one of my
Yeah.
things, also listed for four, is I like giving more than receiving. Like, that's just kind
Hmm.
of who I am. It's what I like. So
That's really okay. I didn't know that about the four. That's really cool. That was helpful for me, like, and even my own, like, I've tried to really get to know all the different types because I'm just fascinated by humans. But that was helpful. I'm like, I either A, forgot it, or B, like, didn't capture that part of the four in my previous learning. So that's really cool. Thank you for
can
sharing
I?
that.
You're welcome. Can I tell you the two things that stuck out to me more than anything, that I was like, oh, I'm a four? Um,
Yes, absolutely.
because it's two, and they seem very simple, but they literally define, like, how I've always felt. One is, I have to be seen as one of a kind. So, like, I am
Mhm.
constantly seeking a way to be unique and different than everybody else. And that is why, like, as you know me, I have a billion different projects and podcasts and music, and, like, I want to create this unique thing that no one's ever done before. And I always have done that as far back as I can
Mm.
remember. And then I'm always searching for my true self. This has come out more than ever in therapy, because that's, like, I always want to know why do I do this, why do I behave this way, like, who am I? Like, I feel like there's so many layers, and I want to just keep peeling them back, and it takes me out of the present moment, which is also a four quality, where I'm constantly living in the past and the future instead of the present. And
Mhm.
it all weaves together to create this beautiful person you see in front of you. So
This beautiful, unique person.
that's right. No one's like me.
No, but that's like, it's so funny because even though that's more of like, I mean, I think for some people that can be seen as not a good thing. I think it actually can also be what makes you like such a curious person and
Yeah.
learning of things. And like, those things can drive cool things. They can drive
Oh yeah.
innovation. They can drive new things. So it's there's good and bad. I feel like with all of these traits, there's like a healthy version of it and a not as healthy version. So I feel like it's like these things are not bad or wrong, or no type is bad or wrong. It's like how you the context in which you live from, like how you
Yeah.
use
It's a
those parts of
balancing
you.
act.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It truly is. It truly
absolutely.
is. Actually, that's one of my other questions. What things have you learned help you find balance when you're in distress? like when you're in your unhealthy part of your 4?
Yeah, one of the things that I related to in the description too is like I can become, and I think this is like true just of people that are depressed, but I can become non-functional for like hours, days, or weeks if I'm in a
Mm,
depressed state. Um, and I think some of it is just sitting with it, but some of the battling that I've done is logistical, really. Like I've created to-do lists and I've committed to doing things without having like this passionate drive behind them, right? Like that's been a giant
mm,
obstacle, and a thing like that's very common with fours is I only want to do stuff if I feel like this in my heart, like I got a song I just gotta play and sing. And it was advice given to me, I believe, from my previous therapist, which was just take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, like set a timer, say, I'm going to commit to doing this for that amount of time. And if you want to quit at the end of that and move on to something else, you can do that. But if you want to keep going, keep going. And in most cases, you'll just keep going. But it's about committing to doing things that you don't necessarily feel like passionate around, because you're so like emotionally drawn to things that if you don't feel that passion, you might avoid doing something altogether. So making these
mm.
to-do lists and setting that expectation where like this is stuff I'm going to do whether I want to do it or not, and committing to that has been huge for overcoming this like being 100% emotionally driven in your life, because that doesn't work. That is a train wreck waiting to happen. There's got to be some logic built into there.
That's it. I mean, that's great. That's amazing. That is like, because I think not, I mean, definitely type 4s, but I think a few other types can also relate to that, where
Yeah.
like when they're unhealthy, they just like are like, if I don't like something, if I'm not interested, I won't do it. It's like,
Yeah.
but you have to do your taxes. That's
Well,
not
you
something,
think
I don't
about,
know if anyone's ever emotionally driven to do that.
I don't know, I get a little numbers obsessive. I get excited about it. Plus there's the
That's
payoff, right?
funny.
In some cases you
Yeah.
get a
Yeah.
return. um but I think there's something to be said
That's
about it
funny.
too, because most creatives, like most in the realm of entertainment and movie stars, music, whatever, rock stars,
Mhm.
the majority, I believe, are fours, if I'm not mistaken. And if you think about it from that point, like, and as someone that's been in, and you too, that's someone that's been in the music industry to some degree, like it takes more than just the talent to do anything with that. There is a lot of discipline involved to actually build that up to be successful. And I think that's why there's also so many unsuccessful, really talented people, because there's a lot involved there that doesn't really fit in the box of passion and emotion. It's more like logistics and paperwork and schedules, and that can be an immediate like shut off switch for a lot of creative people that are deep into that Enneagram 4 type.
Word. That is so true. There's like so much more to it than just the creative and like wanting to produce. And like, you just have to have like all these different things that a lot of people, yeah, you're right. If they're just creatives, they could be incredibly in talent, or they could be incredibly talented, but that only gets you so far. Doesn't actually like create like the business of music
A real
essentially.
pain in the
So
ass.
yeah. Yup. Yup.
Yeah.
Yup. It's so true. Um, so I the other question that I have for you is, what are some of the most important things that learning about your fourness has helped you with?
uh, Honestly, I think the biggest thing would be the very hard truth that I'm not as unique as I think I am. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just so much of my life was driven from a point that like no one could possibly understand how I feel, or like what it's like living in this world that I live in. And then you find out that like all fours feel that way. Like that is the core of who that person is, like who the Enneagram is, of the 4 type, and the romantic, if you will. And that I'm really accepting that, like, oh, so I might be like a little dramatic when I think that way. And it was very grounding, and I can still get
Mm,
wrapped up in it, and that's fine. It's helpful that I am sober, so I don't have to like have those moments when, after like 2 6 packs, I'm like, nobody understands. But it is very grounding and life changing to have that perspective, that your unique perspective might not necessarily be that unique. Um, and it helps in relating to other people. Like it definitely helps drive the empathy that fours are already strong in. But when you think that no one else knows how you feel, it's kind of difficult to be empathetic in some ways, right? So
Mm,
being able to step outside that has helps relate to people better and build better relationships, uh, while still knowing that's like a driving force behind the creative stuff that I do. Does
mhm.
that make sense, or is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. Well, and like it sounds like needing to find balance in that so you can connect better with people. I
Yeah,
also wonder too if it takes a little less pressure off of you. Because I can only imagine, like, again, I don't know, but like I can only imagine if you're like, hey, like I have to be unique, like if that's like a driving force, that's a lot of pressure. Like that's a lot of like, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like it's like I don't
yeah.
I guess that's what it feels like to me for my sevenness at least. I'm like, oh, and not that like I mean it doesn't mean I've never felt like, oh, it'd be so cool to be unique and like I can appreciate that and trust me, I can definitely appreciate that. But it also, yeah, it feels like a lot of pressure.
But and it all ties together, right? Like this is that weaving that I was speaking to earlier. Is if I don't feel that way for a period of time, like then I can get into kind of like the depressed part. And then part of that is
Mm.
when I am in some form of melancholy, sometimes I just want to be there. Like I have, I have movies and stuff that I will go to almost to put myself in that state.
Mm.
Because I think a lot of, especially in the world of like music, I think a lot of people think that like that's where some of the creativity comes from. And it does sometimes, like I've written a lot of songs when I've been super bummed out. and and so in that, like, I think my brain has made those connections when I was younger. Like in tragedy, you find this unique creativity that you can't have without being in the tragedy. And
Mm.
so you're constantly seeking that, but then getting older and realizing like, ooh, not healthy to live there all the time. So then it comes back to that balancing act. But all those traits weave together, and one causes
Mm.
the other, and like the third one pulls you out of it and leads back into the first one. And um, it it really does paint a full picture of who you are as a person. And it's circling back to the beginning, also super frustrating because now I'm still fitting in this freaking box that I don't want to fit inside of. So the
Dun,
Enneagram
dun,
works in weird
dun.
ways. Yeah.
That's funny. Circle, full circle. Okay, so with that, and this is kind of funny that this is like literally a question I have for all the types, but very, very interesting for this type. What do you find often gets misunderstood about fours? And I say interesting
Um,
because don't they feel often misunderstood? Anyway, but like, what do you think?
yeah,
Big picture, what do
everybody
you think
misunderstands.
people, yeah, mess up about fours or like an area they mess up or something that like people tend to get wrong?
I mean, I can only speak for myself. So I don't know. I don't know if what people get wrong. I don't think there's ever been
Hmm.
anything put on me in like in regards to the Enneagram that I disagree with, except for, I mean, for me, it's the emotional stuff, like I mentioned earlier, and it's
Mm.
frustrating. So the book I have and some of the other Enneagram stuff that I've looked at, there's like illustrations, right, where it'll show like 9 different cartoons, and it's essentially how each Enneagram reacts to a certain situation. Like one of them is the one that sticks out to me. It's coffee break, right? So it shows a bunch of people like either at their desk, like maybe a 2 socializing with a 7 or whatever that looks like. In the illustration for the four is sitting at her desk just crying, and the 2 is there just comforting her. And I was like, well, hold on. Like
Wait
that's
a
not
minute.
my persona at work. I'm not just the
Mm.
like emotionally out of control person. And like I don't want to be that person. And
Mm.
I think if that's put on me, I probably get a little resistant to that label. and
Yeah.
and rebel against it, which is also part of being a 4. But yeah, I think that would be the
Huh.
thing. Like even though I want to be more in touch and expressive with my emotions, I don't think they're as dramatic as fours are made out to be sometimes.
Yeah. Or like, I feel like it feels like that wouldn't, at least me knowing you, like, I feel like that's not what that scenario would look like, right? Like, or a four at work. Like, I don't think a four at work is like, that would not be functional if they're literally at work crying every
Yeah,
day.
I
Like,
think
that's
of
just like
myself more
not
as like,
even like realistic.
yeah,
Um,
I want to be the
yeah,
entertainer at work. Uh, like I'd
I
rather
could
be
see,
cracking jokes than lashing out
yeah.
emotionally.
Or I could see the four maybe being like just feeling misunderstood or something, or just feeling like not, I don't know, like that being more being like how they feel about a conversation or a situation. That's where their fourness might show up
Yeah.
versus like them being like literally crying. Like,
Well,
I
and
don't
that's
think that that's
so not to
funny.
draw
Yeah.
back to another little cartoon illustration here, but there's one that's like after the party, right? You get home from the party. This is what all the different Enneagrams are thinking. And you go
Mm.
to the four, and it's this like grumpy guy looking in the mirror and being like, why did I even go to this party? And you're like, bro, like, again, this all seems like I do think I'm emotionally driven in certain ways, but I don't, maybe I rein it in better than other people. I don't like that
Mm.
label of this is what's controlling all of my interactions with other people, is just like high emotional intensity and
Mm.
uh and melancholy. That's
Yeah.
that doesn't feel appropriate. But everything else
Right.
about it, I feel like, yeah, you could draw me out with all the other characteristics of a four, but the highly emotional, don't call me too sensitive person, while I think it is very reflective of who I was as a child, I don't relate to it as an adult.
Mm.
So
Yeah, and I think I really appreciate, there's a one book that I have. I wish I actually brought it with me. It would be cool to kind of dig into that, but they talk about like different levels of functioning in each type. And
yeah,
so I feel like maybe what the artist was illustrating was a low functioning four.
yeah,
Does that make sense? Like a not as healthy four, you know? So
oh
it's
yeah,
like,
for sure.
because yeah, I think that that's where the extremes come out. Um, the healthier we get, the more on like our number we are, which is kind of funny. So,
Yeah, yeah,
or at
I
least
keep
that, yeah, or at least in the
climbing up to a
extremes,
one.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
see. I
Very
dream of being a
interesting.
one. I'm a four that wants to be a one. um
Isn't that funny how like people, maybe I should add that question, because people typically are like, I want to be a specific number. And I find that interesting too. Like, I'm like, oh, what drives people to like want to be different numbers and their perception of these numbers? Um, so interesting. So
yeah, and I
anyhow.
mean, without diving into it, because you'll be my new therapist if we do, but like I had a breakthrough moment last year, I think maybe almost 2 years ago. No, anyway, either way, where I realized like my whole life has been about validation and seeking value in myself through other people, never providing it for
Mm,
myself. And in that, like that fits the four to a T, right? Like the entertainer who constantly needs to be complimented and told you're good enough and all that stuff from other people, because otherwise I get depressed and melancholy and all that. Like it fits very well. But then I had
mm,
that realization and really focused in on that and like stopped doing social media stuff that was purely about getting people to like and comment and everything, and um, started providing that value and worth for myself. And in that, my mindset has changed on a lot of things, and a lot of the things I used to agree with the four don't really fit that anymore. And while some of those cores are very true, it's that major life change in my mind that has really started veering me in another direction. So I
mm,
don't know. And that was the thing when we started this. I told you I used to take these tests for work and stuff, and then I would get different results. They always had a disclaimer in there that said, your values are always going to be these 5 things. It's called the Strengths Finder. It's a Gallup's thing. Anyway, unless you go through like a dramatic life change. And looking back at that and keeping that in my mind as I go through all the Enneagram stuff, I think I might have done that. I might have like shifted my number, because of
yeah.
the life change that I've gone through. So it's tricky. We'll see. I'll take the test again in like 3 years and let you know how it looks.
Yeah. And again, I think it is neat to let ourselves be ever evolving. Like, I know in my own therapy journey too, myself, like, there have been layers. Like, there are things I was working on, and it was like, I'm in a good space, and maintenance was like, it felt good for a minute. And then it's like, I slowly see more and more parts of myself and things I have to heal or work on, or I don't have to, but I choose to heal and work on. And I feel like there have been different phases and journeys in my life where I focused on different things. And in each of those phases, I feel like I probably could have fit into different numbers. You know what I mean? Or I
Yeah.
could have fit more into certain things. But yeah, I've definitely seen that evolution in my own life too. Like, my life has been layered, and I'm currently going through a layer in my therapy journey that it's so funny because we'll have to talk about this in a different time. I did a hypnosis session, and one
Oh
of the
my
things
God.
that was,
Can we
yes,
please? I've had
yes.
I have one on Friday coming up.
Okay. We have to talk
God.
about this different time and place.
Yes.
But real briefly, like, there was like a thing that came out of it, wasn't even my intention in it, because I did set an intention. And now I see it all the freaking time. And I'm like so annoyed by myself, but it's great because I didn't see it before. Like, I literally, like, it's like somebody's taken a lens of like clarity on my life where I'm like, oh my gosh, I do this so much more than I thought I did. Like, this is a big problem. And now I'm like, obviously, like, okay, I'm going to work on that. But I literally
Yeah.
didn't even see it. Like, and
I'm
that's why it's
so
like hard to
curious.
explain things to people sometimes, because I'm like, as you evolve in the Enneagram in your life and
Yeah.
therapy, like, as you go through layers, there will be things like you didn't see before. So while you're like, oh, like, maybe I wasn't that, it's like, maybe, or, it could, yes, it could be both. It could be that you were not that, or like, I literally am learning things about myself that I didn't see before. So it's crazy
I'm
when that happens. Yeah.
so excited to have that conversation with you.
So fun, so
Good.
vulnerable. No, but it's good. No, I'm happy to discuss it. And yeah, it's cool that you're doing that too. Cause it's like, I'm like, there are not many people in my life doing hypno that I can really talk about it with, if that makes sense, or at least on a deeper
Yeah.
level.
Yeah.
So most people are like, oh, that's crazy. So anywho, before we wrap things up, I did want to ask a last question of like, what else do you think would be important to share? Would you like to share about the Enneagram or your type?
So I would just say learning this the hard way and not doing my therapy homework. Be open-minded and read. And I think that that's stressed in this book, and I don't think it's stressed enough when people discuss it. Do not accept how other people number you, because some people that are very well versed in the Enneagram, based on how they know you, might be like, oh, you're such a 5, or whatever that looks like.
Mm,
And nobody knows us better than ourselves, right? When you're going through some of these questions, like we talked about in the beginning, um, seeing stuff that maybe you want to be, but you have to be honest with yourself and really answer the questions for who you are. And I think you'll get a much more accurate um, portrayal, and try to block out any preconceived notions that other people might have numbered you along the way.
yeah. No, that's really good because you're right. People can kind of, I think they can have good intentions, but you're right. They can number us
Yeah.
and they can put us in a box based on our number, and we can do that to ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny how it's like, watch out for the ways that you might be boxing yourself into. Um, Very cool.
Yeah.
Anything else as far as like the Enneagram stuff?
I just think it's super interesting. I think it's definitely worth it for everybody, whether you're looking to like venture down a road of introspection or you just want to play around for fun. I think it's really interesting to see yourself defined in a way that you might not have been expected to see going into it. Because everyone I know that has looked into this and taken the test and gotten like a number has had some moment during reading about it where they've been like, get out of my brain, because it's just so accurate, and there with a
Mm,
few things, and much more accurate than like, a tarot card reading where you're like, oh, they might be talking about my grandfather, but like, no, this is like dead on describing you in a way that you didn't think was possible to put on paper. I've seen that from everybody that I know that's taken it and gotten a number and read like descriptors, and always
yeah.
always entertaining at the very least, but super interesting if you want to look into it more.
Yes, no, you're so right because and I've had people too that like if they take a test, it doesn't feel like it resonates, they write about other numbers and then they figure out they're like, actually, I'm even though maybe if they didn't take the full test, for instance, like I've had a person who was like, I am this, even though I tested as this, like as I was reading, I was like you said, get out of my head. Like it was like those weird moments where you're literally just like, ooh, like how are they in there? How did they know this about me? Like it's kind of a I don't know. I know for times, or there were times for me that I was like, ugh, like I don't talk about that. So like, yeah, just to like see it on paper is kind of yeah, it's a little bit eye-opening.
Mhm.
So cool, cool, cool. Well, that will be the wrap up at least for this video. So thanks
Yeah, I was gonna
everybody
say, I
for
think your
watching.
recording's about to end regardless.